So, picking up from chapter 6, from the first video of chapter 6, remember we left off talking about critical thinking and creative thinking and how they're different, how they're similar, and then about the different generations and how that plays a role into our ability to problem solve. All right, so we're going to get into a little bit of the psychology aspect of it. Keep in mind, as we are talking about this, there is a whole uh, different section or a study of psychology. We're clearly going to just skim the very, very top of it, or the surface is a better way to say that. And we're going to kind of dip into this term called working memory. So um, it was a concept that was developed by a 20-year cognitive psychologist, and pretty much he started it by saying, why don't students like school? And then from that and all that research he did, he developed this whole concept called working memory. And when we're talking about working memory, we have developed that we have learned that there is a relationship between the working memory and a long-term memory. And there's two big concepts that it talks about, and I'm going to kind of give a solid example that kind of explains and relates the two concepts together. So the first concept is that humans do not like to think. Okay, as a human, we do not like to think. It is easier and it is more familiar for us that when we are faced with a situation, we're going to draw or rely on our past memory to determine how we're going to act. All right, and that in turn is what is stored in our long-term memory. And the example I want to give to kind of show this relationship between working memory and long-term memory is example of if I'm walking down the street as a 30-plus-year-old adult. I'm walking down the street, I'm hungry, and I see a tree with berries on it. Okay, what am I going to do? All right, I'm not going to eat them. Why am I not going to eat them? Well, I don't know if they're poisonous. I don't know if they're edible. Now, my 3-year-old son, Cooper, he's walking down the street. He sees that same tree with red berries on it, and he's hungry. What is he going to do? Well, he's probably going to take that red berry and he's going to eat it. All right, so why do I not eat it? Well, my past experiences, I have either learned and someone has taught me that you don't eat those berries, or maybe I ate a berry one time and I didn't feel so good afterwards, or I've learned that they're poisonous. I've had those experiences. Um, to show me how to react in this new situation. All right, so my working memory are my experiences, and then my long-term memory is going to be what I've learned from those experiences. Whereas Cooper, he hasn't had those experiences yet. Okay, so his working memory is still developing. He maybe hasn't had the experience of me telling him, well, Cooper, we don't eat red berries off trees. All he knows is he's had the experience that mommy sometimes feeds me red berries that look exactly like this. So that's a kind of a good correlation in that our working memory correlates directly with our long-term memory and how we're going to act or react in situations when we're faced again with them. Okay, so clearly there's we understand that our behavior begins with sensing this information. Our environment draws our attention. That information in itself is the working memory, and then as we get older, if the information is not in the long-term memory, or if it doesn't exist or we can't recall, then we're going to work through a new approach to whatever situation it is that we are facing. The biggest thing I want to kind of reply or recall or kind of like focus in on this specific aspect is that the more information that we can have in our working memory, the better thinker that we're going to be. Okay, so in order for us to stick and develop our working memory, and in order for it to stick into our long-term memory, we have to make sure we recall it and we apply it repeatedly. Okay, so the more often that we can recall things, the better thinker, the more advanced, and the stronger our brain is going to come, so to speak. And that's obviously going to help us when it comes to thinking and relaying that into critical and creative thinking. So when we're faced with these experiences. We're going to talk after we talk about learning styles with choices. Our life is full of making choices. It's being faced with choices and decisions to make. It's faced with learning. Okay, it's faced with pulling out our intelligence and kind of where we thrive. And all of this is kind of the tail end of the psychology of learning. And we're going to talk real quick about the learning style. All right, so all of us have a different, unique learning style. We have a unique personality. No two people are exactly the same. That's a phrase that you hear a lot. But ultimately, we all have a preferred way of learning. Okay, so in order for us to learn to think critically, to think creatively, to make these sound decisions, to develop our working memory and our long-term memory, we have to know how we learn best. Okay, how we learn best is tapping into our learning preferences. It is tapping into our learning style, and it's tapping into our intelligence. All right, so how can we maximize our potential? How can we maximize our productivity? It is understanding what environment we thrive in. Okay, do you thrive when it is quiet? Do you thrive when it's cooler in the room? Do you thrive when it's warmer? Do you thrive as an individual studying by yourself, or do you thrive as an individual or as in a group setting or like with other people? Some people are evening or morning people. Some people are late morning. Some people are afternoon people. So we have to understand where we thrive the best and put ourselves in those situations. There's one thing that we're going to talk about at the very end of the video, which is perceptual adaptation, which talks about or dips into that we can become used to these specific surroundings and how sometimes you might study best right now as an individual, but then you're going to hit a point where, you know what, or a topic or subject where you need to study in a peer group. All right, and that is perfectly normal. So the big thing is making sure we have different learning strategies and techniques. We connect them. We play around with different combinations. When you become frustrated or you become attuned to one specific learning task, then you try something different. The big thing is making sure that we are experimenting and we understand that what might work right now may not work in a couple months, may not work for math 180, but it might work for biology 103. Okay, understanding that all of that plays a different role. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but learning preferences are going to be connected to our personality type. We talked a lot about in chapter 4 kind of what your personality type is, and there's a couple of assignments in chapter 6 that also talk about the combination of personality type and learning preferences and understanding that those are tied together. And we're going to leave it right there, and then I will pick up with one more video completing the chapter 6, talking about making choices and relating that to the critical and creative thinking and all the other topics that we've talked about so far.